Hi folks, I'm back this time to talk about defences. There are a number of defences in criminal law to remove criminal liability. So if we go back to the basic key elements, actus reus plus mens rea or strict liability, minus a defence equals criminal liability. So if the defence, i.e. the defence team, solicitors and barristers, can find a way of removing one of those elements, such as removing the actus reus or removing the mens rea, then they can remove criminal liability and their client will be acquitted or not even charged in the first place. These defences then, they're called, the word is defence. What a defence means, it's a reason or a justification or an excuse for somebody's behaviour. The classic example is self-defence, where somebody has got the right to defend themselves or their property, as long as they're reasonable and proportionate. So when we talk about defences, we've got general defences, and a general defence is like an excuse or a justification or a reason that's been accepted by the courts through common law over a long period of time, that when a person raises this defence, i.e. I was defending myself, or somebody threatened to kill me or my family, so I had to commit this crime, the courts have said, in these circumstances, this removes the actus reus element or the mens rea element. So in other words, the person they may have the actus reus or the mens rea, but this is removed. So I'll just carry on. This is removed due to the breakdown of this criminal liability equation. In your assessment, you may get asked direct questions such as, what is a duress? What are the 4 different types? Let me give you an example. I'm going back to one of the past papers, and into January 2019, the past paper said, identify any 4 elements required to establish a defence of duress by threats. So you are more than likely going to get one question in the section A, which is like 1 to 10 asking basic questions. You're more than likely going to get one question on defences. There's a good chance then that in one of the 3 scenarios you're going to get a defence present in the scenario, so you need to be able to recognise them. Right, in your chapter 6 then of your book, although I know you don't all have this book, but I've put one of my chapters up on Teams and Blackboard for you. You're required to deal with define intoxication, explain the circumstances where intoxication will provide a defence, apply the requirements of a defence based on intoxication to a scenario, identify the circumstances giving rise to a defence based on duress, apply the requirements of defence based on duress to a given scenario, explain the requirements of a defence based on mistake, explain the requirements of a defence based on self-defence. What that means then, you are asked to apply general defences to the scenario, or you learn what they are and answer questions in the first section A, explaining what they are. So you could get a question saying, what is intoxication? So in summary then, I'll read this to you. This is their summary. The criminal law recognises a range of defences. Most of these are general and absolve D from all liability. Some defences apply to particular crimes only. An example is diminished responsibility, which applies to murder only and is partial. Such defences reduce liability to manslaughter. So in the past you've spoken about partial defences. That means the person is not acquitted. It just reduces murder to manslaughter. General defences, they result in a complete acquittal. So if a person raises a self-defence or duress, then the only outcome is guilty or acquittal. If it's successful, they get an acquittal. Now, intoxication is a bit of an anomaly. It's not theoretically a defence, it's a denial of mens rea. Intoxication may be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary intoxication excuses the defendant from liability only if the offence is one of specific intent. Now, what that means is some crimes require this very high level of intention. They're called specific intent crimes. Murder, a Section 18 wounding or GBH with intent, robbery, a theft theoretically. That requires this very specific high level of mental intention, and they're called specific intent crimes. All other crimes can be committed recklessly without that very, very specific level of intention. They're called basic intent crimes. And this was decided in a case called R.V. Majewski in 1977, where Majewski was a bloke who went out, got drunk, took drugs, beat up some people in a pub, then the police turned up, he gave them a beating, and then he was taken to the cells, woke up the next morning and said, "Sorry, I didn't mean it, I was drunk. I've been taking drugs, I've been drinking, I'm very sorry, I didn't mean to hit anybody." And the court said, "Well, no, we're not having that. The fact that you were drunk doesn't negate your liability. It might do if it's a very specific crime, like a murder, which requires some, like an element of mens rea, direct intention. However, if a person gets drunk, they're automatically placing themselves in a state of recklessness. So you've got voluntary intoxication where a person deliberately gets drunk, and involuntary intoxication where a person may have the drink spiked. And this can affect their liability. So the voluntary intoxication, if a person gets drunk on purpose, they want to get drunk, and they go on to commit a crime, depending on the level of mens rea required for that crime, it depends whether they can deny the mens rea, saying, "Well, I was so drunk, I could not possibly have formed a mens rea to kill somebody," in which case it would be manslaughter. The leading case for this is a case called R.V. Ramsbotham, where Ramsbotham is a young chap who's got a very, very low IQ. He goes out drinking all day and ends up going into somebody's house late at night, having been drinking vodka all day, and demanding the laptop and some money, and gets kicked out of the house. And then he goes and he sees some bins and some wood and sets a fire and kills the woman who is sleeping in the house, and is convicted of burglary and murder. His defence team raised this defence and say he was so intoxicated he could not form a specific intent for burglary or murder. And this was combined with his extremely low IQ. So he was acquitted of the burglary and the murder, and his murder was reduced to manslaughter because he could not form specific mens rea. A mistake is a denial of mens rea if the offence requires proof of intention, knowledge, or subsequent recklessness. Then an honest mistake is sufficient. So if it's a mistake as to facts, then obviously this can be used. If it's a mistake about the law, then that's no defence. So ignorance of the law is no defence. Ignorance of facts or circumstances can be. So in the case of R.V. Williams Gladstone, when Gladstone sees a chap attacking another chap, or what he thinks is attacking another chap, and he goes over and intervenes and sort of remonstrates and grabs hold of one of the men, it transpires that this man was capturing a robber. Somebody committed a robbery. This chap had apprehended them, and then Williams had got involved and come in at the end of it all, and he ended up getting charged and convicted of assault. And he raised his defence saying, "Listen, I made a genuine mistake." And the court said, "Yes, you didn't see the beginning, so we'll accept that you got the facts wrong." Again, not applicable if it was about the law. Duress is somewhat more complicated, and you need to devote more time to duress than probably some of the other things. There's two types of duress, but I'll read what it says here. Duress exists as a defence to most crimes, apart from murder and attempted murder. So you can't use duress if it's a murder or attempted murder. The recent changes in duress mean that there's a development now of duress of circumstances. So there's two types of duress. These have come from common law. They're still in common law. Duress from threats and duress from circumstances. They are similar, and it's where a person, in the first instance, somebody says to a person, I will kill you, or I'm going to kill your children or wife if you do not steal some bread from this shop, or if you do not go and beat this person up, I'm going to kill you. And the person genuinely believes this and has no opportunity to get to the police or to raise the alarm. But it cannot be a murder. So it can be shoplifting. But the person who's threatening has to sort of say, you will go and steal this, or you will go and do this. It can't be like just a general threat, like go and get me some money or I'm going to kill you. It has to be a directed crime. The leading case for this is R.V. Hassan. There's an objective and a subjective test for this, and that's found in R.V. Graham. So have a look at those cases. Then there's also duress of circumstances. That's where a person finds themselves in the circumstances that they feel that they're going to get killed or something really bad's going to happen to them. And this the key case there is a case called Martin, where his wife says, if you don't drive my son to work, I'm going to kill myself because he's going to lose his job. And he genuinely believed she was going to kill herself. And I think he was a disqualified driver and drove. So that arises from a set of circumstances. Another very common and important one that you need to know is self-defense. Now, you get self-defense type in scenarios where two people are fighting or a person's being attacked and another person can use force, reasonable and proportionate force, to defend themselves. The person can make a preemptive strike. So in R.V. Beckford, you can use force first if you think you're definitely going to be attacked. Again, you've got to explain this, and you've got to it's got to be proportionate and justified and reasonable. So with self-defense, that's on a statutory footing. What you need to think about with self-defense is that a person can defend themselves, somebody else, or their property. It's in this particular book, and I think in general, there's quite a lot of reading with these defences grouped together. So if you think, I'll just sort of sum it up, you've got the criminal law liability, actus reus plus mens rea, minus the defence equals criminal liability. Well, if you remove the actus reus or the mens rea element, then you will remove the criminal liability overall. There is a lecture on Blackboard and on Teams which goes into more detail with this. Again, I strongly recommend you go to the past papers, have a read through them and see if you can actually spot questions relating to defences, and have a look through the scenarios and see where you can see how defences could be raised or are in operation. Thank you.